In systems theory, any entity, when abruptly separated and then suddenly returning, generates an impulse that alters the entire existing structure. 3 words that no one in positions of power wants to hear. Right now, Harry is back. After cycles of self-imposed exile and the eruption of opposing streams of information, the sudden appearance of a detached fragment in London is far from merely a media event. From an investigative perspective, this is not a social visit or a routine diplomatic ritual. Could we be witnessing the beginning of a heritage decryption? A mission driven by historical data, obscured for decades, pieces that the system has tried to secure to maintain the stability of the monarchy. The moment the private jet touched down on the runway at RAF Northolt, a gray zone of information began to spread. No ceremonies, no smiles for the cameras. This presence carried the character of a discreet system intrusion. The unusual increase in royal security around Clarence House, unexplained and sudden, is a reflexive instinct of the institution in response to an unpredictable variable. Why has silence become the palace's primary tool at this moment? In information analysis, silence is rarely a lack of data. Rather, it is a tactic to control cracks that are slowly emerging. Harry no longer appears as a lost individual. Instead, he embodies an aura of absolute consistency. No defiance, no anger, but the assurance of someone who holds a crucial key, one capable of rewriting the entire script that the system has long maintained. Behind closed doors, senior officials seem to be facing a ghost from the past. Decisions once considered essential to protect the crown are now suddenly becoming fragile. As the truth begins to leak through the cracks of the power structure, how will the entire system react to prevent a chain reaction of collapse? This comeback is not spontaneous. It feels like the fateful intersection point, where events that began years ago have finally reached a point of collision. Has Harry discovered a truth powerful enough to break even the oldest security protocols? We stand at a historical crossroads. Is this the final attempt at transparency, or the beginning of a new chapter where heritage secrets will no longer be the most secure protective barrier? What is your hypothesis? 1. Did Harry return to seek genuine reconciliation under new conditions? 2. Or did he bring with him a truth key that would force the system to change permanently? Share your analysis in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to follow the second half of this investigation, where we'll unravel what's really behind the whispers at the palace. Those who believe Harry is merely seeking attention must confront a completely different reality. He didn't return to relive the past, but to reconciliation with it. As the palace walls seemed to hold their breath, a disturbing theory began to spread. What if Harry's entire belief system about his identity had been meticulously orchestrated from the very beginning? Internal sources from Highgrove Manor revealed the existence of a sealed file bearing an identifier, Operation Guardian. This is not part of a royal ceremony, but appears to be a security protocol never before published. The appearance of this file, bearing the late Queen's coat of arms and linked to Charles Windsor's name just weeks after the 1997 Paris attacks, opened a rift in Harry's identity structure. Inside that file, the most haunting element wasn't the administrative documents, but a handwritten letter from a woman who had long been silent. Diana, from a strategic analysis perspective, this letter contains not only emotions, but also a blueprint. System alert. Diana seemed to have foreseen a scenario being constructed behind her back, a mechanism designed to shield her youngest son from a truth she believed he deserved to face when the time was right. The reaction from the royal legal apparatus was immediate and forceful. An attempt to block the flow of information was launched, but it seemed too late. Harry, with cold certainty, issued a landmark statement, "I have the right to know, and now the whole world will know too." This is not anger, but a re-establishment of ownership over a personal history that has been manipulated. This investigation leads us to a complex network of secret guardians. A chilling entry was discovered in Princess Anne's personal diary in 2003. The exile pact must remain in effect. He must not know about it. The big question here is, what did they agree to expel him from? Anne, the embodiment of steadfastness, now appears as a guardian of the crown's deepest truths. William's quiet involvement and Camilla's stabilization role further reinforce the hypothesis of a coordinated effort to maintain the current structure at all costs. Every diplomatic smile now seems a protective shell for a silent agreement. It has existed for 2 decades. We are faced with a paradox of truth and loyalty. As the layers of Operation Guardian are gradually peeled away, the picture of British royal stability is being subjected to unprecedented pressure. What is your hypothesis? 1. Are these secrets necessary tools to protect the survival of the throne? 2. Or is transparency the only remedy to mend the rifts in the brotherly and fatherly relationships? Please leave a comment with the number. If you believe that the truth needs to be revealed in its entirety or number. If you believe there are secrets that are best left undisturbed in order to maintain the integrity of the institution. Press like and subscribe to the channel. Join us in our in-depth investigation into the power dynamics hidden behind the glitz and glamour. In an institution where survival depends on legitimacy, stability is not just a goal, but a tactic for navigating the flow of information. From a systems analysis perspective, we see a persistent effort to protect the concepts of lineage matrix and bloodline heritage. In 2019, an information hygiene protocol was activated to divert international press attention away from DNA theories. The goal was clear: to prevent a crisis of confidence that could turn royal standards into an uncontrolled topic of discussion. Beyond just media coverage, legal barriers have been erected to delay any investigation into the transparency of succession documents. All requests for data access are denied under the guise of privacy protection, but in reality, this is how the system protects its resources. Breakpoint, his most sensitive moments. However, the truth often finds a way to emerge through silences. The most devastating shock for Harry didn't come from legal obstacles, but from a symbolic silence. In the final days of Queen Elizabeth II, a final covenant was made. Every senior member received a sealed letter of blessing except for Harry. Was this exclusion a mistake, or the final consolidation of the covenant of silence? Long-standing for Meghan, this is an unmistakable signal Harry has been turned into a pawn in a large-scale preservation strategy. Throughout the years of conflict and exile, the chaos we see is actually a meticulously orchestrated scenario to conceal a fundamental truth, one that leads directly to the most powerful figure today, King Charles. In an isolated area of Balmoral Castle, where secrets are usually kept hidden by the stillness of the forest, a fateful dialogue unfolds. Now standing face to face with his father, the highest guardian of the system, Harry asks for a resolution. Absolute exposure. No assistance, no media, only the truth, and irreparable cracks remained. In that private room, the tension built up by decades of avoidance reached a breaking point. King Charles, his voice heavy with regret and resignation, seemed to have acknowledged something that shattered every piece of his identity Harry had ever held. It was no longer a family conversation. It was a moment that life script. The story of a prince is completely torn apart, revealing a naked reality behind the velvet curtain. Finally, all the masks were removed. The existence of the Highgrove files, codenamed Operation Guardian. And the haunting letter from Diana has been officially confirmed. Charles doesn't deny it. He admits to having approved it from the very beginning. From a systems analysis perspective, this is an attempt to establish a hypothetical safe zone to protect Harry from psychological trauma. However, for Harry, this wasn't protection, but a battle, denying the right to self-determination and individual identity in a systematic way. The burden of the accusation, "You have chosen duty over truth," now hung like a knife cutting into the foundations of the dynasty. Charles, in a state of profound shock, attempted to explain the impossible. The post-Diana era was a time when the royal institution fell into a serious operational crisis. To preserve it, system integrity, and with the line of succession so fragile, a special arrangement was implemented, a scenario Diana had vehemently opposed during her lifetime. The king's silence in response to the question, "Am I part of the plan?" That is the most accurate answer. In the world of symbols of power, individuals are sometimes merely pawns in a larger-scale survival strategy. The meeting at Balmoral did not end with a solution, but with a resolution. Tactical retreat. Harry walked away, leaving behind a king haunted by the very secrets he had once so painstakingly guarded. The portraits of Diana were covered up at Clarence House, not out of disrespect, but as a manifestation of a psychological pressure of inheritance. That's too much. However, the final variable lies in a rebellious act from the mother's past. Diana's voice, frozen in recordings and handwritten letters, was unearthed from an ancient, secure safe. The message was simple: "To my son, if they ever try to silence you." This shows that Diana had anticipated this confrontation decades in advance. She had established the last line of defense. For Harry, an information loop is only opened when the system attempts to control him again. Diana has always lived in fear of her being erased and her memories reshaped by power structures. But she managed to establish one fail-safe backup mechanism for the future. The recording begins with words carrying the weight of thousands of unshed tears, an echo from the past affirming that the system has failed to bury the truth. She spoke not as a royal symbol, but as an instinctive protector. Diana presented a chillingly detailed theory about a systematic strategy aimed at severing the emotional connection between her and her sons. This is an attempt to controlling the flow of emotional data, minimizing her influence to preserve the institution's image at all costs. Diana's whispered words, "They thought you wouldn't ask anything, but I knew you would." This officially broke the silence in Harry's mind. A name not found in official records, yet clearly present through subtle hints: bloodline. This not only shook the very foundations of identity Harry had accepted, but it was also the ultimate liberation. The instincts that had been keeping Harry awake all this time weren't delusions, but rather the echo of truth, which his mother had sealed away, waiting for this very moment. For Harry, this was no longer a confirmation of pain, but freedom. A freedom not controlled by any royal script. With Diana's words still echoing in his ears, Harry made a choice that shook the very foundations of the monarchy. A 72-hour ultimatum. It was sent directly to the king's private secretary. This is not a threat, but a challenge. Public reconciliation. Either the system must reveal the truth itself, or Harry will be the one to lift the curtain. This single strategically significant email has put the royal press office in a precarious situation. Systemic chaos. The palace walls no longer whispered but roared in the face of the most explosive confrontation in modern history. Within, the power struggle of the dynasty time was no longer on the side of the gatekeepers. Control over the flow of information had officially shifted from the institution to Harry. A frequency collision. A heated argument ensued between the two heirs. William, in a last-ditch effort to protect the stability of the system, attempted to trigger emotional barriers from the past. However, Harry responded with a cold conviction, "The system chose duty over my identity." This is no longer a personal debate, but a refusal to compromise of an entity that has seen through the entire operating mechanism of the organization. Behind that decisiveness is Meghan, who plays the role of a strategic catalyst. After a long period of silence, she urged Harry to undertake a mission: Anatomy of the Past thoroughly. The goal is not revenge, but to unleash the system to reclaim her true identity. Meanwhile, Camilla is present in a state of defensive chaos. Her attempts to establish a legal wall to silence this variable completely failed in the face of King Charles's exhaustion. The king's whispered words, "It's too late." This was an admission of the collapse of all the oldest security barriers. The Windsor institution was paralyzed, with half attempting to appease public opinion and the other half holding their breath in the face of a crisis. The heritage has been distorted. It's about to be revealed. Harry wasn't just planning a typical press release, he was orchestrating a whole new one: media revolution. In an unprecedentedly bold statement, Harry broke all royal protocol. He directly connected with the public through digital platforms, without intermediaries, without censorship, and without a script crafted by PR professionals. This was a significant move: direct decoding. He sent it to millions, exposing the secrets that had haunted him for years. Harry wasn't looking for a sensational headline. He was undertaking a mission. Verify the facts. On a large scale, it asserted that the world deserves to hear what really happened behind the glamorous velvet curtain. Harry no longer held back any reservations. He began with a statement breaking decades of silence. "They lied to me and they lied to you all." From an investigative perspective, this is a case system audit, the most public in history. Harry exposed the entire structure of Guardian campaign, the coded entries in Anne's diary, and especially Diana's message from the afterlife. The message, "My mother has always just wanted me to be free." It resonated across continents, transforming an internal secret into a shared human pain. The truth was no longer confined within the walls of Balmoral. It had become the property of the public. In just a few hours, the digital world exploded in a revolution. Global payments. Hashtags such as Royal Reckoning. Good justice for Harry. It's not just a media trend, but an expression of a movement demanding transparency. However, the palace's reaction is what's most shocking: 24 hours of absolute silence. In communication theory, this silence is called a risky strategic vacuum. The lack of rebuttal or statement is tacit confirmation of the existence of the forbidden protocols that the royal family has long feared. The institution, once proud of its stability, is now facing a profound crisis of confidence, where old rituals are no longer sufficient to conceal internal rifts. Outside Buckingham Palace, crowds gathered not to protest in the usual way, but to establish a new order of trust. The banners tell the truth, and Diana deserves to be treated better. This demonstrates how Diana's legacy transformed from personal pain into a driving force for systemic change. This is not just Harry's story, it's a lesson about the price of silence and the collapse of old values before the unfiltered power of truth. A deep crack has formed at the very core of the monarchy, a crack that directly threatens the very survival of the Windsor kingdom in the new era. Within the power structure of the kingdom, the emergence of a transparency variable from Harry has created a powerful counter-impact on William, a figure previously considered the central pillar of stability. Behind that resolute exterior lies a struggle, a civil war of the mind, caught between loyalty to the institution and the pain of fractured trust. For the first time in years, the heir to the throne undertook a mission: tactical retreat away from the front lines of defense. The abrupt cancellation of public routes and the establishment of a zone of silence at Anmer Hall was not merely a personal break, but a sign of system paralysis. In that isolated space, William is confronted with a grim paradox. Is the organization he has dedicated his life to protecting truly the one that orchestrated the manipulative schemes against his loved ones? The climax of this crisis lies in the decision to implement a campaign. Data audit. Most aggressively, William demanded direct access to the original files of Guardian campaign. This is the moment when the guardian of the institution decides to confront the forbidden data zones himself. Sitting alone amidst Diana's past footage and Harry's current statements, William seems to be undergoing a process. Psychological restructuring, profound. What was recorded in that sealed file became a life-changing variable, shaking all the values he had once considered fundamental. When the key to the truth is revealed to the heir, his silence is no longer a defense, but a preparation for a confrontation. Redefining heritage, an action that could permanently alter the future structure of British royal power. The tension was now undeniable. The man trained to endure in silence was beginning to face a systemic crossroads. For the first time, William, in the eyes of observers, seemed to be questioning whether the price of maintaining the regime's stability was exceeding acceptable limits. Not just for Harry, but for the entire family structure upon which this institution relies for survival. He understood perfectly what the system expected: stability, absolute loyalty, and above all, disciplined silence. However, alongside that expectation, another layer of consciousness was supposedly emerging. Not the consciousness of an heir, but of a son, a brother carrying memories that had never truly closed. From a psychological systemic analysis perspective, this was the moment when individual identity began to clash with predetermined roles. Some indirect sources suggest that William is not merely reacting, but is calculating, not with impulsive emotions, but with cautious, deliberate steps. And that's what makes the internal atmosphere more unpredictable than ever. The hypothesis is that the next decision, if any, will not stem from the title, but from memory. From the image of a mother who once tried to speak up in a system that was unaccustomed to listening. When two brothers stand on opposite sides of the same history, the entire structure around them is forced to pause and observe. In large systems, turning points rarely come with noise. They usually come from a quiet but irreversible choice. And then, according to recorded signs, the monarchy's reaction emerges. Not in the form of punishment nor exclusion, instead a move that surprises many an offer powerful enough to become the new glue or the catalyst for complete collapse. A few days after Harry's speech, which sparked widespread global interpretation, a secret message was delivered, not through the press, not through public legal channels, but through a personal envoy. The letter bore the official seal, but its tone was unusual, unceremonious, not commanding merely a proposal for a private dialogue away from the spotlight and the chaos. To some, this might be seen as a signal to de-escalate tensions. To others, it raises questions about a familiar delaying tactic. According to various theories, the family's reaction was not uniform. There is caution resistance and the memory of previous dialogues that failed to bring about substantive change. What makes this moment different from an analytical perspective is not the content of the letter, but the context. When an individual is no longer seeking approval but clarity, every invitation takes on a different meaning. Is this an opportunity for a genuine restructuring of the relationship, or merely a last-ditch effort by a system seeking to maintain control of the narrative? And if that dialogue does take place, who will truly listen, and who will confront the issues that have been delayed for so long? Speculation about the king's health began to surface as noise in a system designed to shield information. According to circulating theories, the prolonged pressures of his role, sleepless nights, and a series of urgent meetings may have led him to reflect more deeply on time and his legacy. There were whispers that he himself had carefully chosen the words in the letter, not as a command, but as a final message to be delivered, while the opportunity still remained. Under the lens of systemic analysis, this was not a sign of weakness, but rather a reflex of a structure facing its own limitations. The proposed conditions were audaciously minimalist. A private meeting between the two brothers, no staff, no press, no recording equipment, just the people and the distance that needed to be faced. After days of deliberation, the agreement was reached not out of optimism, but out of the realization that the longer the unspoken words lingered, the more fragile the system became. Those around them maintained a cautious attitude. Protectiveness and wariness went hand in hand, but everyone sensed a subtle shift, like the wind changing direction before a storm. Behind closed walls, discussions began to emerge. Not about protocol, but about the possibility of restructuring for a different era, one where difficult acknowledgments, unconventional meetings, and decisions once considered impossible were put on the table. Some advisors presumably considered contingency plans, not redefining right and wrong, but repositioning roles, seeing Harry as a potential contributor to the future rather than a symbol of division. Yet this was not reconciliation. Not yet. It was a fragile balance where an ill-considered remark could shatter what had just been rebuilt. But for the rare occasion in years, the two sides entered the same space not as adversaries, but as a family trying to listen to each other. That family was fractured, yet still connected, albeit thinly. Then a final piece of information emerged, a short, anonymous statement from a senior aide. No context, no explanation, just a single line that made observers and constitutional experts pause to ponder. If Harry had returned, perhaps not in the usual way. The story thus continued to unfold, with truths to be examined, relationships to be mended, and secrets to be approached only through questioning. The content you've just watched is for reference only, built from hypotheses, analytical perspectives, and unverified public opinions. It is not an official statement or conclusion. The goal of this video is to open a space for objective discussion where everyone can think and evaluate based on their own reasoning. Now it's your turn to speak. Press 1 if you are curious about the hypotheses presented. Press 0 if you remain skeptical and want to wait for clearer evidence. Don't forget to like and subscribe to continue peeling back the layers of information behind the curtain of silence, where the truth only emerges when we